Hey guys, I hope you're doing super well today. So I know you've all seen this before now, but we're doing it again. So grab some coffee. I love this mug. It says drink coffee, do stupid things faster with more energy. I think it's really cute. So today, finally, we're gonna talk about the best books I read in 2018. I am so excited to finally talk about this with someone, even though it's only my camera. Please talk to me in the comments about all this so I can vent in a way. Actually, before we start this video, is that I'm probably not gonna have any fantasy books. And that is because I made a best high fantasy video not too long ago, and all of those books in that video, more or less, I've actually read in 2018. So I decided not to talk about them all again because that would seem like repetitive and redundant, and those are synonyms. But I thought that maybe you can just go and watch that if you want only fantasy. I do have 2 fantasy books to talk about today anyways. Sort of more magical realism fantasy to talk about today. So we're gonna get the first one out of the way. I already talked about this in my last video. This is a new favorite young adult fantasy, and that is Nevernight and God's Grey by J. Kristoff. This is gonna be at least a 3-book series. So in this world, you're following the main character, Mia Corvair, who basically had her whole family killed when she was very young, and now she wants to join this assassin school so she can learn to take revenge on the people that killed her family, basically. So that is what it's about, but also Mia Corvair, she has like a darkling, I think it's called, which means that she can control shadows and that kind of thing, and we don't know too much about it in this book, but I think it develops in the second book a little bit and you learn a little bit more, but I'm so excited to learn even more. There's also different types of magical people in here, which is really interesting, and in this book she also travels through different parts of the world, and it also has 2 maps, which I think is really cool for like a fantasy book. Highly recommend this series. It is a little bit, it's like so, like I just want to, like, you breathe it in, like you read it so quickly, you just like can't stop. Like that was, it's like I love those books where it's so good, like you can't stop reading, because some books, I'll talk about them later, they're really good, but it's not the types of books that you just like constantly want to be reading, or you just like consume them. I don't know, but these books are just so addicting. That's the word, they're so addicting, and I can't wait for the 3rd one. Now let's talk about sci-fi first. Let's do that, and then I'll get to all of the contemporary magical realism later. First one I want to talk about is Leviathan Wakes, Caliban's War, and Abaddon's Gate. So this is the first 3 books in the Expanse series. They are in a completely different order according to you. And the second one is actually a 4-star, so it shouldn't be on this video, but I'd be weird talking about just the 1st and 3rd book. So this is a 8th book series in April. I think the 8th book are coming out then, and this is like high fantasy for fantasy, but it's like high sci-fi for sci-fi. I don't know what they would call that, but it is a space opera, so you're following this crew who basically works with taking ice from the Saturn belt and transporting it to the asteroid belt where people have moved out from Earth, and Earth is occupied by 15 million, I think, and so people were forced to move out of the planet, so people live on Mars and the asteroid belt. It is really interesting to see how people develop physically when they live with less gravity, which I thought was really cool, and you follow this crew on that ship and loads of things happen, and it is very like doomsday, end of the world, one person has to save everything, but I love that it is so dramatic, and I think parts of it is a little bit too technical where they're explaining like how things work with science when it wouldn't actually work, but I also sort of love that you can like hypothesize about like this would work because of this, even though it wouldn't work, but it sort of makes sense anyways. I love that about these books, and also why I also wanted to read more adult sci-fi. I love the series. I bought all the books in this whole series up to the 7th one, so I can't wait to get this one. So in the first one, you're following 2 people. And in the beginning I thought they were like the same person, but when they meet you can really see the difference between them, and I really love that. You get to follow loads of characters, and it also is action driven, but it's also very character driven, which I really loved. The second one was a little bit of like a mess or jumble, but the third one is also so good. It is also kind of about like alien zombie virus, which is so scary to me. Like the worst way we can all die on Earth is if it was like a virus who just kills us all. That must be the worst, and I kind of love reading about it, oddly enough. Abaddon's Gate actually follows way more people, but it's also so good. I'm gonna get to the next book now before I because I just I can't stop like talking about all my favorite books. Okay, next sci-fi. This is a young adult, and that is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This became a movie, so I actually decided to read this now because of the movie. I watched the movie 3 times since it came out, which I realize is very nerdy, but I love it so much. So in this one you follow this guy called something, I don't even know what he's called. Oh my god. This boy who lives in like the stacks, which is basically loads of trailers that are stacked on top of each other, and it is a world where this video game has basically taken control of people's lives, and people kind of stop living in the real world and they live through this game world called, oh my god, it was so long ago I read this book, even though I've seen the movie like a million times. The Oasis! There we go, the Oasis. They live in the Oasis, and basically you can create like an avatar, you can be whatever, and the main character, he goes to school in the Oasis, and the Oasis has this huge game, and this is like why I love this book so much. It has a game where you have to find 3 keys that the creator of the game left behind when he died, and you find these 3 keys, you actually get the whole Oasis and the power of the Oasis, and you can do whatever you want, like his whole fortune basically. The main character, he is like a egg hunter, gunter, I want to say gunter, who basically he knows all this pop culture and everything that the creator was interested in that you need to research to be able to find these 3 keys, or the Easter eggs, sort of thing. And I love all the reference to 80s pop culture. I obviously didn't understand all of them because I'm not like a nerd in that sense, but I loved it anyways, like because I knew most of them, of course. I thought this was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. It's just like a really enjoyable read in that sense. So yeah, I love this book so much. The next one is kind of like an adult sci-fi. This is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. In this book you follow this man who has a family, a wife, and a child, and he used to be a scientist, but he gave all that up for his family. And then one day he gets kidnapped and brought into another dimension where he is that scientist, but he doesn't have his family, because he is doubting a lot if he made the right choice about choosing his family over his career. And sort of from there, like the whole thing takes off, and I love the whole idea that for every decision we make there's an alternate dimension living in what would have happened if we took that decision. I love that concept. I think it's so cool, and I like to think that's how it is, because if I don't choose to do one thing, then maybe there is a part of me in another universe who is living that reality, which makes me calm about not choosing the wrong thing, because a part of me is living there. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but that makes total sense to me. This book was so cool, and I don't really want to explain more or reasoning for what happens later, but I loved it so much, and it is so funny. Like, there's a part where there's like a million versions of him, and it's so funny. Like, I loved it so much. I highly recommend it. It is an adult book, but it's definitely not a hard one to read. It's super easy read. Anyone can read this, even if you're quite young, actually. But I highly recommend it. It's really funny. So those were all the sci-fi books that I wanted to include on this list. Let's go to the magical realism, and then we go from magical realism to the contemporary stuff. So also, new favorite book, The Toy Makers. I am going to reread this soon because I read it and then I didn't really appreciate it like I would have appreciated if I knew more like after the book. Like when I finished it, I sort of wanted to like start over. I don't think it would be the same for everyone though, but I really love this book, and I am not a fan of historical fiction. I'm not a fan of like war books, but this one just did it so well, and the magical element in this was amazing. So this one takes place in 1917, and you follow this little girl who basically is kicked out of her family because she becomes pregnant, and she takes refuge in a toy making store, basically. And then she becomes friends with the two children of the father who owns the store, and you kind of get to see all this like magical things happening because one of them has the magic to kind of make the toys come alive and the other one doesn't, so you follow the rivalries between these two boys and also how the main character fits into this. And also it is a very like melancholy book because there is a lot of parallels drawn between these toy soldiers and the real war going on, but it is also very well done, and I highly recommend this if you like historical fiction, or even if you don't like it. I really enjoyed it. It doesn't have a focus on war, but it more is like it is there and this is how it's all connected. I really like this book. It was just really well written, and it was one of those books I saw the cover and I'm like, this is the book for me, like I just need to read this, and it turned out to be like one of my favorites. I loved it so much. Okay, coffee break. I'm getting like way too excited. I'm so sorry, guys. Ugh, magical realism. Okay, let's start with this one, Kafka on the Shore. So I have been looking for Kafka on the Shore for ages. It was also one of those books that I read something about it online and I was like, I need to read this book. And sometimes I get this obsession over books. Like I see a book and I just know I need to read this book. Like I don't know why I get it, because there's nothing about this book that makes me would want to read it. But then actually, because I really hate the cover, the ones that Murakami has these covers going around, I'll talk about this book soon, that is like black and then it has like red or white or something, like few colors on it, and I don't really like these colors at all, these covers. And so when I found this cover of Kafka on the Shore, I was so excited. It is not beautiful, but it fits the book very well. So this takes place in Japan, and you follow this guy called Kafka who runs away from home because his dad has made a prophecy that he's going to kill his dad, have sex with his mom and his sister, and he runs away from home because he doesn't want this prophecy to become true. And slowly you can kind of see how the prophecy does become true. This is magical realism, but is also not. I can't explain why, but because it is kind of gonna ruin the story to you, because you kind of just have to like read it, but it is so brilliant. Like I love Haruki Murakami. He's like, I think my favorite author of all time now. I'm gonna read all of his books. I love them. It's like the level of Brandon Sanderson when it comes to fantasy. It is so good, and I highlight so many things when I read this book. This book has a focus on time and the past and the present and how much they are happening at the same time, and how much effect we have on the past as we're living in the present, kind of that thing. I love those kind of things, anything that has to do with time. And it also has a focus on dreams, which loads of his books do. There is a scene in this book though which I hated so much because I was crying. There's a point where this guy is killing cats. It's not a spoiler at all. He's just slaying one cat after another, and whew, like I'm almost getting emotional. It is so traumatic. Like I have never read in a book where it's so brutally traumatic. Like I'm just crying because it's like he's just killing like ruthless cats, and the main character has the power to stop him, but it takes him like 5 cats to stop him, and you get so frustrated because you're like, why aren't you doing anything? Like stop his cat killings. And I think I even like, it was so bad I literally crossed out the pages and wrote to myself. Yeah, so from here, I annotated this whole book too because it was so good. I crossed out the pages, I think 4 or 5 pages of him. This is all him just killing cats. And then I just wrote everything I need to know on this little sticky note so that if I ever read it again, I don't need to read this part. So when I read that part, I was almost like, oh my god, I'm gonna give this book like a 1 star. But then I finished the book and I realized how brilliant the author is. So, highly recommend this. That is my favorite Haruki Murakami book, but now I'm going to talk about all the other ones I read by Haruki Murakami. Oh my god. I'll start with the other one, that's Magical Realism. This is a recent release. I love this book cover. This is Killing Commendator by Haruki Murakami, about a guy who his wife leaves him. He goes on this journey to find himself, which is basically what all of Haruki Murakami's books are about. It's always a guy who something happened, he's kind of depressed, he tries to run away, but then he needs to solve whatever happens to him. And he ends up at this little cottage in a mountain in Japan, and he is a portrait painter and he wants to give all that up, but then a guy who lives in a mansion across the mountain that he sees from his balcony comes to him and asks him to paint his portrait. And so he says yes, but it doesn't turn out to be a normal portrait. And then loads of this like magical realism things start happening, and you kind of have to interpret his books for yourself. Like, in a way, you don't really understand what's happening, but you can feel what it means. Like, I can't explain what this book is about, but I can feel what it's about. Which is something I don't really experience very often with books, but it is absolutely brilliant. This one is about like a magical well and a little guy who pops out of a painting of the artist that lived in that house before him. That's all I'm gonna say. And you can do what you want with that information. Next I'm gonna talk to you about Norwegian Wood. This is only contemporary, no magical realism at all. You get to follow this main character who is also very melancholy. You get to follow Toru, and his previous best friend committed suicide. He basically falls in love with his best friend's girlfriend, who kind of also really suffers from her boyfriend's suicide. And you get to follow Toru as he just lives his life in college. And there's something very natural about the way Haruki Murakami writes. Nothing special happened in this book, but he writes it like exactly like it is. There's nothing really there to... It's not beautifully written, but it's so honest, and I've never read like an author that writes like this. It is absolutely amazing. Huge what is it called, trigger for suicide. Everyone in this book kills themselves, basically. Like, there is like a little sentence where it's his best friend's girlfriend from college. Not the characters I've been talking about previously, it's not important. She ends up like killing himself or killing herself, and it's just like one line. And you're like, wait, what? Like, nobody ever talked about how this girl was even sad. Like, it's just like everyone kills himself, and I think it's a little bit comical because it's so extreme, but I think it's also very much like Japanese culture. Maybe I'm stereotyping that because we all know about like how Japanese people are very like feeling bad, doesn't want to cause family shame, so they just kill themselves. Unfortunately, that happens a lot, and it is so good because the ending is very like, what do you think happened? Which girl did he choose? And it has a lot to do with life and death and different representations, and this was a book club book that I recommended, and it was so much fun talking about this. Oh, it has so many good quotes. Like, he's so good. Like, if you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking. Like, he has so many things of these, like, just added in there. When you're surrounded by endless possibilities, one of the hardest things you can do is pass them up. Loads of them. And then also he has these things where he says like, this was caused by that, and that means this, because of which thus and such. Like that. I can't tell whether this kind of analysis is trying to simplify the world or subdivide it. And he's so good. Like, Murakami, I love you. Like, it is brilliant. Maybe felt that way because I thought about it so often, too often, to the point where it had distorted my sense of time. I can relate to that so much. And the last Murakami book I wanted to talk about, this is sort of like a special mention sort of book. This is The Colorless Tatsuki Tasaki and His Years of Pilgrimage. This is definitely a more simpler read, and it's much more easy to understand. This one is not so much interpretation. You basically just read it, and that is it. The other two books is way more like, you don't know what happened kind of thing, but this one is just like a simple story. Definitely has a little Haruki Murakami touch to it. I love this one as well, but not as much as the other one. Last book we're going to talk about is A Little Life by Hanya Yongahara, and I feel bad about including this in the book because I don't want to recommend it to someone because it's gonna like, it's literally gonna like kill you. This was a hard book for me to read because it has to do with basically self-harm, rape, and all that. You follow 4 guys who live in New York and their friendship together. The book starts out kind of going to the backstory of all the 4 people, but then as the book goes on, you kind of only follow 2 of the main characters, and the main one being something in... oh, I really want to remember his name. Jude! You basically get to follow Jude for the rest of it, and you get to slowly reveal his backstory, and it is just, it's so tragic that I don't even want to imagine that people actually go through this. Like, yes, I had a phase where I was also going through like a hard time, but I loved how this was just like, oh my god, it is so sad. It is so sad. Like, this book is so sad, and I don't even want to talk about it anymore. I'm never gonna read this book again. I just want to say that, like, never ever ever gonna read this book again, but I am so glad I read it. I don't know if I want to recommend it though, because I don't want to like put anyone else through this pain, but it is so brilliant, and it also has a lot to do with like sexuality and childhood abuse stuff. Was called Destructive Relationship. There's one point where Jude is together with this guy called Caleb, and like I cried like just like the whole thing when he was together with him, because like I was so frustrated at Jude not taking care of himself. I'm not gonna talk anymore, just read it if you want to. I'm not gonna say anything more. So those are all the great books that I read that weren't basically fantasy books in 2018. I also just wanted to say that these are not all the 5-star books that I had in 2018. I have loads of more that I gave 5 stars. They're all really, really great book in more of the category of sci-fi, contemporary, and fantasy. So if you didn't get enough recommendations from this video, then you can just go to my Goodreads. I'll have the link down below, and you can check out all the books that I gave 5 stars to. And I hope you guys enjoyed. I link my video for last year, but I do want to put like a little disclaimer. I have reflected on some of the books from 2017's best books, and I don't agree with all of them. Like, I put Finding Audrey on my best of 2017, and it wasn't in the top 10, you know what I mean? So I probably should have like narrowed that list down, but all of those books are still really good from 2017, so I recommend you check that out. These are not all released in 2018. I just want to say that these are books that I read in 2018. Okay, I'm gonna go now. Tell me below if you read any of these and what books were your favorite from 2018. I would love to know, to get recommendations and all that stuff, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!